Hello and welcome back, Pumpkin Patch. I am your guest host, Matt Moser from the Great White North, and these are my selections for today's episode of Days of Halloween. Let's get started. For my Halloween classic, I chose the 1985 film Clue. This was directed by Jonathan Lynn, and actors include Christopher Lloyd and Tim Curry. The basic plot of this movie is... Wait, do I really need to explain the premise of Clue? It's based on the very popular board game we all play as kids and was one of my favorite board games growing up. 6 people are in a mansion when, you guessed it, a body is discovered. The 6 famous colors must now work together to figure out which one of them is a darn murderer. Despite a lot of mature themes like adultery and bribery and murder, I really felt this was a pretty good family classic video. I loved watching it when I was growing up with my family. Throughout the film, of course, there's a lot of hijinks, more dead bodies end up showing up, and it really is the definitive whodunit movie of the 80s. Now, I wasn't born when this movie came out in theaters, but I really wish I could have seen this movie in theaters. The film actually features multiple endings, with each of the endings featuring a different killer. If you watch the movie nowadays, you get to see all of the endings, but if you actually got to watch it in the theaters when it came out, each of the theaters was sent a different ending. So some people left the theater saying, oh, I can't believe this character was the killer, and then some people were like, no, this one was the killer. Obviously this was intended for you to go see the movie multiple times. The plan didn't really work, it was a box office disaster. But, still a pretty good movie. Also, apparently this movie is going to be remade starring Ryan Reynolds, because of course it is. For my pick for overlooked horror, I chose Silent Hill, the movie. Of course, this is based on the iconic video game series of the same name, but the first film, at least, was actually pretty good on its own. It was released in 2006 and directed by Christoph Gans. The movie stars actors such as Sean Bean, and I will let you watch the movie to see if he survives this one this time. The film starts with a woman named Rose and her husband Christopher trying to figure out why their daughter is having nightmares about a town called, you guessed it, Silent Hill. The town has been abandoned since the 1970s, and Rose, against her husband's wishes, takes their daughter to the town to figure out why she's having these nightmares. Rose is, of course, involved in a very convenient car accident and finds herself, when she wakes up, in Silent Hill, minus her daughter. Of course, the rest of the movie is Rose trying to find her daughter in this mysterious and eerie town. And honestly, at this point, the plot kind of gets a little bizarre and confusing, and really the plot is not why you want to watch this movie. You really want to watch this movie for the atmosphere it conveys to its audience. The movie is, of course, based on the famous video game series, and Silent Hill, the video game series, what it does better than pretty much any horror video game series is just the atmosphere and the tense and eerie vibes you get when you're exploring the town, unlike any other video game series pretty much out there. Of course, another main reason to see this movie is Pyramid Head. I mean, Pyramid Head is pretty famous enough as it is, but to me, he's easily in the same league as Freddy and Jason and Michael Myers as that true horror villain that just scares you every time they're on the screen. And if you don't believe me, look up the church scene in this movie. Do me a favor and do that, please. The story's a bit hit or miss, but the atmosphere and the imagery of the film really save it, really bring it up, and hey, it's actually a somewhat decent video game movie for once. And now for my picks for the late night double feature picture show. I got it right! For my first selection, I chose the 2012 film Byzantium. It's a vampire movie directed by Neil Jordan, who may have also directed another famous vampire movie. The movie stars Gemma Arterton and Saoirse Ronan. The movie's about a mother vampire, Clara, and her daughter vampire, Eleanor, and They're on the run and they find themselves in Byzantium. And history buffs, please calm down. Byzantium is actually the name of a hotel they find on a seaside resort. I think it's somewhere in Britain or Ireland. Claire is always trying to find money for her family, and she ends up turning Byzantium into a makeshift brothel. And she feeds on unsuspecting customers. Has that reference been used in one of these videos yet? How many vampire references can we? How many vampire puns can we fit into this? Are we over the limit? Meanwhile, the teenage vampire daughter, Eleanor, yearns for a more peaceful life away from the barbaric vampire tendencies that her mother sometimes uses. The mother and daughter are on the run from a group called the Brotherhood, a group of vampires who are men only and are responsible for turning Clara into a vampire. The group is pretty much responsible for creating all the vampires in the world. The movie from here kind of takes a non-linear approach to its story. It features many flashbacks looking back at how Clara became a vampire, how Eleanor became a vampire, and how this group of vampires even became a thing in the first place. The movie features a very heavy focus on the vampire lore of turning people into vampires to actually save them. You'll see numerous instances in this movie where vampires actually turn other people into vampires to save them or to avoid them dying from a nasty disease, or mainly just a form of mercy in general. The acting and imagery of this film are really top-notch, and the bond between the mother and daughter vampire, it's really the reason you should see this movie. In fact, all the acting and all the imagery, they're really the focal point. Honestly, the vampire stuff kind of takes a little bit of a backseat just based on how good the quality of the other stuff in this film is. In short, I really liked it. For my second pick for the double feature, I chose the 2016 film Hush. It was released on and produced by Netflix and was directed by Mike Flanagan. And after all those other movies we mentioned, it's time to go back to the basics for this one. A serial killer is trying to kill a woman in her home. That's the plot. It's old-fashioned and simple, and okay, of course, there's a little bit of a twist to the formula. The main character of the film, and the one that's being targeted throughout the whole movie, Maddie, is deaf and obviously cannot hear anything about what's going on around her. The killer realizes pretty early on in the film that she is deaf, and instead of just getting it over with and ending the movie in about 10 to 15 minutes, he decides to play some games with her and prolong her fate for as long as he can. The plot is very simple and old-fashioned, and because of that, other elements of the film can really stand out, such as sound design. Sounds from all around Maddie's house can be heard very clearly, but when the camera pans in on Maddie and her face, it becomes eerily quiet. Obviously, there's not that much dialogue in the film, and because of that, it actually makes it even more suspenseful, and I was really on the edge of my seat trying to figure out if Maddie was actually going to be able to escape the serial killer without honestly being able to even hear him. And for my pick for horror and other media, I chose the TV show Murder in Small Town X. This show aired on Fox in 2001. Dang, that was 20 years ago. Each episode was nerve-wracking and intense, and honestly, even to this day, I've never really seen something quite like it. It was one of the most memorable TV shows I've ever seen, and it was even made more memorable because I actually got to watch it with James Moser. Now, of course, with the title being Murder in Small Town X, of course you can clearly guess what type of show it is. That's right, it is a reality television show. Now you may be asking, where does the reality television aspect come into play about this show? Each week, the contestants' main goal was trying to find clues. 10 contestants were brought to a real-life town full of actors, and their job was to figure out the mystery behind a bunch of killings in the town recently. The contestants were given a large list of potential murderers, and each week it was their job to try to narrow down that list of potential murderers by finding clues in the town. Each week, 2 of the contestants were put up for elimination. And when I say elimination, I do mean that quite literally. Each week, the 2 contestants that were put up to vote for elimination would be sent to a separate and scary location full of eerie sounds and darkness, and their goal was to try to find a vital clue to help narrow down who the killer is. One of them would find that clue and be able to move on to the next episode. The other one was not as fortunate. If they did not find the vital clue, they were murdered by the killer. This would continue throughout the duration of the show, where every episode the killer would end up killing one of the contestants until the very end. The show is really ahead of its time, where the contestants were in this real-life town and there was real-life events going on, and the people that thought they may be the murderer ended up getting murdered themselves, and so much crazy stuff happened in the show. It really amazes me that this really has not been remade at all. And since it did air on Fox in 2001, I'm hoping that there's some way that maybe one day we can get it on Disney Plus or something, please. But to now, I think the only way to actually watch it is from random YouTube videos. Hopefully one day we'll get some form of the show back, but it's been 20 years, 20 long years. Still waiting, still waiting. And those were my picks for this year's Days of Halloween. And if you liked this video, which of course you did, be sure to click or treat, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz to the Fall Horsemen. And I will catch you next year for another Days of Halloween. I gotta figure out what I'm gonna put in that one already. Oh, I'm terrible at this. Obviously there's anything going on around her. Did you get that or not? Start! Target of the serial killer, Maddie. The group is trying to... Features... I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, you're fine now. Why? Alright, stop. Hello and welcome back, Pumpkin Patch. Stop. Got clue. Of course, as the film goes on, there's a lot of hijinks. I really liked it. Wait, that's not. Each week was try to find clues to lower so that it makes you really that much more on edge, and it's a lot more suspenseful. Listen. I really liked it.